Hi, welcome to Lecture 3B of Construction Job Site Management. We're going to be finishing off our lecture this week on the information in Chapter 4. We're going to be finishing off on submittals, and really we're going to be we've talked about mock-ups and we've talked about shop drawings and samples and how that's part of the submittal process. So we're going to discuss how we monitor this information, this procurement schedule information of buying out the suppliers and subcontractors, and where we need shop drawing submittals and samples and all of those aspects. So usually the requirements for submittals are going to be listed in your construction documents and your specifications, required in the general conditions of the contract. And you can require them in purchase orders and subcontract agreements. So when you're working with a supplier to make sure that they're going to provide you with the necessary documents that you need to be able to have reviewed by the consultants, so that you can go ahead and order it with some assurance that this is the correct process. The last thing you want to do in these situations is to be able to have ordered stuff, installed it, and then have it refused. So this is really being proactive to ensure that the right stuff, right things that have been designed for the building are actually acquired, and then you're installing them. And you're installing them according to their instructions, so there's not later problems as well. So it's really part of a process and system of construction to make sure that we reduce errors and that we end up with adding value to the client at the end of the day. Otherwise, it's going to be waste. And these are value and waste. They're terms that are used in lean construction methodology. So we want the review of the submittals, shop drawings, and samples. So there's definite processing systems required for most approval of submittals. The designer is responsible for the design, but any changes need to be reviewed. Revisions may be noted, and we kind of said the designer is responsible for the design before, but they're not necessarily responsible for deviations or something that wasn't part of the design or that couldn't be actually accommodated in the procurement process. So there's this really interesting flow chart, and it kind of goes through the step-by-step process. And I kind of like flow charts because it's really good in construction, and it's really good in systems thinking to sort of think, how does one step lead to another step, and to understand that, because it's also really helpful later on if you want to simplify the process, or that you always have to ask yourself, are there steps I can remove, or can I make this process better? And I'll talk about that a little bit, but you can sort of see how this is contractor issues, subcontracts, and purchase orders. Suppliers prepare submittals for the subcontractors. All right, so the suppliers are preparing the submittals documentation that's needed. Subcontractors should review it to make sure it makes sense. And that it's providing everything that the consultant is going to need. So the subcontractor reviews it. Then the subcontractor gives it to the contractor, and they review it. All right, and they're asking themselves, does it meet all the requirements? Suppliers also, it may not just be for subcontractors, it may be for the contractor directly. Supplier transmits submittal to contractor. All right, so contractor reviews it, and they're asking the question, does it meet the contract requirements? If it does, go ahead, submit it to the consultant. If it doesn't, get it fixed, right? Goes back here and the process starts again. So ideally, you want to be very clear what's required with the subcontractors, or with whoever the supplier is for you if you're dealing directly with them, and get it through one time, because doing this takes a lot more time, and time is money in construction. So hopefully it made it first through, now you submit it to the architect. The architect reviews it. All right. Maybe they have to also submit it. Maybe it's an architect and they have to submit it to the structural engineer. So they may also do that. Maybe it's just them that has to review it. Does the submittal meet the contract requirements? Hopefully it does, because then that goes through very quickly. Otherwise, you go way back up the list and it goes back up to the beginning and it becomes this sort of nightmare of steps. So they approve it, return to the contractor. Contractor reviews, furnishes it, reviews, furnishes, dimensions, provides the dimensions is another way of saying that. Contractor returns to the subcontractor, reviews, sends to the supplier. Supplier orders the material and equipment. So now you've really got the material and equipment now being ordered. Manufacturer fabricates. So if they've, like our example in the previous lecture, if they have to fabricate the curtain walls, it's a bunch of assemblies. It has to go together. And then material and equipment is delivered to the job site. Contractor returns to the supplier. So contractor reviews, furnishes, dimensions if it's returned to the contractor, and then they give it to the supplier. So it just depends whether it's dealing directly with the contractor or it has to go through a subcontractor. That would be the steps that are involved. A lot of steps, right? So that means it's really incumbent to be clear in your communications what's needed, because there's a lot of submittals in a big project. Somebody's almost full-time job to be following through on that process, whether it's a project coordinator. Very often the project coordinator is the one that's doing all the legwork back and forth. And their supervisors are reviewing to make sure things are properly done. But quicker this process goes through, the better. That's where productivity software like Bluebeam, Procore, FieldWire, just to name a few, help to streamline this, because they'll have systems in the productivity software where you submit directly through to the supplier, comes back, it's in the internal documentation. The consultant can access it from there. You can access it from there, and you can see comments immediately with it, which means it's in one place and everybody is reviewing it. That can really streamline and make the steps much more quicker. But it is a lot of process that can be involved, and it gives you a good perspective on the whole submittals process. So usually you might see a form that'll look something like this: a date received, date returned, and reviewed by. Again, you want accountabilities in place, my friend the judge, with the documentation, if you remember. No exception taken. That means that's the same as saying they reviewed it and they don't have a problem with it. Remember I said they don't like to say approved. Make corrections noted. So maybe there's just a few minor corrections they wanted. Maybe it's not suitable. Like revise it, fix it, resubmit it. Maybe it's like totally out to lunch and start again. So, and then there's sort of the legal sort of limitations. Shop drawing review is for general conformance of contract documents only, does not relieve the contractor of the responsibility for compliance with requirements of drawings and specifications. So again, they're trying to also say, if something is missed here, you're still responsible. Remember the contractors to review it as well. So they're trying to hold accountabilities. It doesn't always necessarily hold up that way, but that's what's going on. The procurement schedule is really just logging that information and tracking particularly this information by date. So you can see, because you could have sent this at a particular date and then it sits on somebody's desk and they're not reviewing it. You can imagine if anything sits on somebody's desk or in their computer in cyberspace, then time is going, the clock is spinning. So we have to have a means to monitor that, right? So procurement schedule the activities for particular products, time frame determination factors, size and it kind of depends on the size and complexity of the submittal package. Some things can be very quick. Other things may take quite a bit of time to review carefully to make sure everything is right. And the number of consultants that may have to look at the same document. So you want to have a log that it's used for tracking. It compares the projected dates with the actual dates and determines variances. So used as documentation to indicate unnecessary delays, because a long delay in the process that you didn't cause, that the consultant caused, and now the project's delayed, the client's upset with you. as these things are occurring, and if it's really the consultant, you want to be able to say, well, look, this is on the critical path. We followed up. These are the list of emails we followed up. This was the date it was submitted. It took them 6 weeks to get back to us on this particular item. Sure, it had float in the schedule, and you show them the construction schedule, 4 weeks of float, but 2 weeks it ended up delaying us. That is very important information. That is the it depends in your favor. It depends we discussed in the last lecture. So, contractor reviews, submittals for compliance to specifications, dimensional conformance. You want to make sure it's going to fit. Interface with other materials, and constructability. Sometimes things on drawings look fine, but can they actually work in the field? And that's where the GC accelerates. That's where a good site superintendent accelerates. They understand how things go together. The submittal, another sort of stamp here. And like I said, usually I see reviewed, not approved. Reviewed as noted, instead of approved. But again, there's always these exceptions. So the textbook shows that, which kind of surprised me a little bit because in the States there's so much more litigious than we are, but it's there. So we'll go with it. The use of submittals during construction, several different applications, information for preparation and general construction details. So it helps you with that. Quality control information. This is part of the QC process, quality control, quality assurance. Placement diagrams for installation. I kind of gave you an idea of that where we talked about the precast concrete in the last lecture, lecture 3A. Information for handling and equipment placement. That was even in 3A where it showed how the staging area for the precast, and you might have to shore up the roof of one section to ensure it can have the weight capacity. These kind of things come into place. And any job site referencing. So here's a sample of what a procurement schedule can look like, where you have when it went to the contractor, when it went to the architect, when it went back to the contractor, when the contractor ordered it, and when it was delivered. So it's running its path. What happened in this process? So we call that our procurement schedule, which is really our submittal log, and it's including all these things like shop drawings, submittals, sampling, anything that has to be trailed. We're following it, and we've got it documented. So if we're following it here with the submittal log to the contractor, to the architect, to the contractor, the order date and the delivery date, and then the actual. So the difference here, this is the schedule. All right, it's like the baseline. And so the procurement schedule, that's the plan. That's the plan of what we're wanting to do. And this is the actual. Things don't always go as planned. Construction project schedules, they work very similar. We have a baseline, this is the plan, and then we update it, and this is the actuals, and then we compare it, and then we can see variances. So in this particular case, we can look at temperature controls, right? What was the plan? What was the actual? So this was actually early. What was the plan to the architect? All right, so we got it to the architect. What was the actual, right? We were a bit early. To the contractor, it was supposed to be August 1st. The actual is August 10th. It's late, right? So it's 9 days later than the plan. The order date was August 2nd. The plan, we didn't order it till August 11th. Very little delay between when we got it and we ordered it. We were right on it, right? Because maybe we got it like 4:30 on Thursday and then we ordered it the next morning. The delivery date was supposed to be the 1st. That delayed it by a month. So that 9-day delay here caused a month delay in the delivery date. The supplier could say that, well, we were supposed to have it by that date. We didn't, so we've moved up another project on our manufacturing assembly line, and that project took us a month to complete. That delayed it by that much. So by all accounts, if we were to look at that and say who is accountable to that, we could go to the architect, the consultant, and say that they didn't follow the schedule. That would be the it depends in action. this happened, this happened, this happened, and this caused this delay. And we've got it all clearly documented. Very, very helpful information for us to be able to monitor our projects. If you didn't have that, how could you possibly say the consultant is late? You didn't have them on a schedule. If I'm the consultant, I'm going to say, what do you mean I'm late? Where is it said that when I was supposed to have this done by? Nothing there, right? So it depends is not in your favor, it's in the consultant's favor, and I don't blame them one bit. So you have to be able to document this information, and you have to be able to monitor and trail it. The other thing is too, it also gives you a flag that we've got to be on this. That's where productivity software, you can have these little flags and alarms put in when something is coming up to warn you so that you actually are on it. That's part of the systems thinking that makes it easier to do these things. And we talked about that in lecture 1 when we talked about goals and systems thinking. So this is part of the systems thinking process here. So this all comes into, so what's going on with the temperature control? The delivery date is delayed by 1 month, right? Who is it potentially at fault? The architect, as I said. How does the submittal log help? The log holds people accountable, can be used as a proactive management tool. So just kind of running those points through for you. And this is how we can work things. So as a quick summary, submittals used for approval for compliance to the contract. Just to wrap things up, required in several contract documents. Approval process involves several steps. Cooperation aids in the process. And really what you want to do is you want to be collaborating with the consultants. You don't want to be adversarial. You want to be proactive with them. You want to get their agreement ahead of time on the time frames so that everybody's working in unison. And that helps. And I also know when I'm being monitored, I'm being watched, and somebody cares about it and somebody really needs it and that's been vocalized, that I don't like to let people down. So it kind of ups on my priority list of management. So the contractor's reviewing those submittals for a number of reasons as we discussed. So hopefully that's given you a good sense of the submittals process and why it is important and how it ties in with systems thinking that we talked about in lecture 1, goals thinking, and we'll be on to the next topic next week. So thanks again for listening, and I'm Tom Stephenson signing out. This is the end of lecture 3B. Everybody have a wonderful day. Till next time.